Hello everyone, this is StrawberryShorty, here with my video, The Real Plot Twist of Little Hope. Just a fair warning, this video will contain spoilers for the second game in the Dark Pictures anthology, Little Hope. This is my first of what I hope will be a lot of videos like this, ranging from ranting about various games to sharing ideas and theories and, stuff like that. Anyway, let's get started. So, upon beating Little Hope for the first time, everyone seems to come to the same conclusion, that it was all just in Anthony's head. Admittedly, at first glance, that does seem to be what the game itself wants us to think. He's not really a young college student, and no one but him can see the other characters, who all disappear once his true identity is revealed. I was spoiled on this alleged twist soon after starting the game, so it didn't hit me as hard. But looking in the Tumblr tag and on the subreddit and the YouTube comments, I saw a lot of people upset over it. While I don't think the game's story is great by any means, I do think it's more powerful if, rather than hallucinations, the other characters are actually the spirits of Anthony's dead family. It wasn't an outrageous idea, really. I mean, no reason it couldn't be true, right? That's how I preferred to look at things, at any rate. And then, as I watched multiple Let's Plays of the game, I started to pick up on things. Little details that supported the idea that we were dealing with ghosts of some kind. For example, a lot of what the curator, who's strongly hinted to be death, says when referencing the characters. He often refers to them as souls. If you save Angela on the bridge, he'll tell us that we saved her from a fate worse than death. Should you fail to beat the game with everyone alive, he'll comment on how some found redemption while others didn't. His dialogue is littered with stuff like this, which doesn't make sense if everyone but Anthony is a hallucination. There were also plot holes the endgame reveal made people bring up, which made more sense with the idea that we're dealing with people that were real, if not alive. If the idea is that Anthony is hallucinating the other characters due to his head injury, why then is he hearing the voices before the crash? Not only that, but despite all the people who swear the bus is empty, you can't actually see people in it. Then there's the fact that the crash itself only happens because a little girl who looks strikingly like Megan suddenly appears in the middle of the road. This idea also explains how characters were able to do things apart from Anthony, including finding and giving him that #1 dad keychain. And then I learned of the unlockables. If you take the time to find 49 of the secrets in Little Hope, two things happen. You receive the 2-part comic Secrets of Little Hope, and you'll unlock the last secret. What makes this last secret unique is that earning it alters whatever version of the ending cutscene you get to reveal a new detail. Anthony has a poppet. The description for this item suggests it was made in a jail cell, and the comic confirms Anthony made it while incarcerated after the fire, to remind him of his sister Megan. It had to mean something. Why would this be the last secret otherwise, and why go so far as to literally change every single ending scene to reveal its presence? The answer, I believe, lies in what exactly a poppet is. During the game, we see Mary in possession of one, a creepy doll with what looks like a nail shoved through it. During the trial at the end of the game, both the judge and Reverend try to suggest that it's a tool for evil in their efforts to condemn Mary. Anthony's poppet is the last secret that you can get in the game, and interestingly enough, it ties into the first. The game opens with Anthony getting on his bus and setting down a book. After the crash, you can find this book, and if you turn the page, you'll find an entry about poppets. It says the following: handmade dolls and poppets are created to represent a particular person. Spirits may be summoned to inhibit them and assist with magic. This is a form of sympathetic magic where the energy imbued in the object by the ceremony is transferred by correspondence. Anthony's doll was obviously made to represent Megan, and in the comic, he looks at it and talks about how those he's lost have been with him all along. It's up for debate whether or not Anthony intentionally did magic, but the reveal of this poppet definitely sets the stage for magic and the supernatural to at least be a possibility. Before reaching the end of Little Hope, many people theorized there was some kind of reincarnation curse going on, only to quickly dismiss the doubles as yet another product of Anthony's mind once they beat the game. My theory is that this is actually the case, and the Secrets of Little Hope comic seems to support it. Part 1 of the comic centers around Reverend Carver, who in the game we see condemning many people for witchcraft. He's writing a confession in which he admits to having engaged in witchcraft himself. He also speaks of those he's wronged, the many he's had unjustly executed, quite possibly as some part of a ritual, when you take into consideration the elemental properties of the deaths we see and compare them with some cryptic notes we find in the game. Specifically, he says, "Those I've wronged have been left to repeat their suffering, and I, like those I have wronged, am doomed to live my sin again and again. The comic also shows the demons born from Amy and David, which attack Angela and Daniel in the game. This is by far the strongest evidence to support the idea of a reincarnation curse, but there is more. The comic shows the portrait of Amy to be very much real, and she does strongly resemble Angela. It also shows us how the picture of men who look like Andrew, Daniel, and John going off to war ended up broken on the ground. Vince angrily threw a glass at it. Perhaps because the young man in the photo looked like Anthony, whom he hated? This is shown right after we see the broken bust of Tilly Johnson, perhaps suggesting he was responsible for that as well, due to her looking like his lost love, Tanya. We already know he tore Tanya from a photo of them together following her death. These things would suggest the doubles aren't just a product of Anthony's mind. I'd also like to draw attention to one of the bad endings in which all the characters die and Anthony takes his own life. The achievement for this is called No Escaping Fate, implying his fate was always to die years after everyone else and by his own hand. We don't know how his counterpart in the past died, only that it was about 7 years after the witch trials took place. So what do I think happened? My theory is as follows. Reverend Carver was initially a good man, determined to stop the pagan practices occurring in Little Hope. We learned from the monument in town that his wife was abducted into slavery, and that no doubt had a pretty strong impact on him. His position within the community gave him a lot of power and respect, and he ultimately gave in to temptation, jealousy, and greed. He manipulated and maybe even abused Mary. It's never made abundantly clear whether either pastor in the game was actually guilty of this, but Carver calling her Satan's whore and insisting she bewitched him certainly sounds suspicious. Abuse would also explain Megan's acting out and her crying as she reads the letter Carson sent her mother, in which he's talking about seeing her more, when we already know he keeps holding her back after prayers from a comment Anne says. Before I go on, I want to talk about Mary a bit. Thinking on it, I don't think she was truly innocent in what happened. She may have been afraid of Carver, especially in light of Amy's threats, but I do believe Amy was right when she said Mary disliked the woman scolding her, and that she did have a temper. When Carver talks to Mary before Amy's trial, he doesn't mention the seizure that she fakes, and even if he threatened her into doing it, just look at that smile on her face when she recovers. For Carver's part, there's the ritual idea, but I also believe greed played a heavy part in him targeting Amy. We can find a document about how he was trying to force her husband Joseph to give up his land, citing a contract dispute. This caused bad blood in the community, and the game even acknowledged it's believed to have culminated in the accusations against Amy. Tabitha, Mary's sister and one of her caretakers, is next to be accused and executed. Playing the curator's cut, we see that this was seemingly entirely Mary's doing. The marshal is somehow aware of the puppet Tabitha has, thought to be an object of witchcraft. This doll was revealed in an earlier scene to have been made by Mary, with Tabitha taking it out of fear she'd be suspected of witchcraft. When Tabitha pleads with Mary to admit this, the girl denies it. She doesn't even seem particularly bothered by her sister's death, and if we're to believe Abraham, she actually smiled during her execution. I think she deliberately caused her sister's fate. We never see anything about Carver having a part in this, and he might have very well just gone along with it to get one of Mary's guardians out of the way. It seems likely that this is why her brother David, the other of her guardians, was targeted next. In his grief over Tabitha's death, he talks to what may or may not have been her spirit, and is overheard by Mary and Carver. Carver insisted he die to protect Mary, prompting David to say nothing could ever make him harm her. This is the first time we see Mary trying to stop what's happening as she begs Carver to spare her brother. Perhaps his words moved her, or perhaps she realized no one will be left to keep her from Carver if he dies. Regardless, her pleas fall on deaf ears and she's put into the care of Abraham. To Abraham, Mary expresses remorse over her role in the trials, quite possibly admitting to her lies. Torn, he goes to talk to Joseph, who advises him to expose her as a liar. He is hesitant, knowing this may lead to her death. Joseph himself is subsequently executed for witchcraft, though we don't know much about this. It seems likely Carver just wanted him out of the way, as he was angry over Amy's death, he was spying on Mary, and then there was the whole land dispute thing. Probably easier to just kill him and put an end to all that. What happens next is largely left up to speculation. Mary almost certainly ends up on trial herself, but in the game, we decide how that ends. Her being burned at the stake fits with the theme of her dying via flame. However, I have my doubts that she's found guilty. The secrets we find reveal Carver was eventually exposed, and I think that would be very difficult without Mary's testimony. It's possible she was executed afterwards for her part in the deaths of so many innocent people, but that too seems unlikely to me. I mostly think this because she has a grave, something that seems unlikely if she died for either of those reasons. Amy only had one because her husband retrieved her body and buried it in a secluded spot. I doubt even Abraham would have been able to get a tombstone erected for Mary if she'd been burned as a witch, especially having caused the deaths of so many others. I think the trial results in Carver being dragged off, but sometime afterwards, Mary burns to death. Perhaps Carver somehow causes this, or perhaps it's the vengeful people of Little Hope. Maybe it's just a freak accident. I'd bet on Carver being involved somehow, though. Afterwards, a grief-stricken Abraham takes his own life, and the curse begins in full. Carver, Mary, Abraham, Amy, Joseph, Tabitha, and David are all doomed to eternally repeat their fates. The victims will always end up close, be they family or just connected via something like a school. Carver will always abuse Mary and eventually be disgraced. At some point, everyone but Abraham dies via the way their past selves died, and he is left to suffer alone until he finally takes his own life and the cycle starts anew. Now let's talk about the Clark family and the fire. This is a bit of a side note, but I hear a lot of people complaining about the demon behind Megan never being explained and the possibility that she started the fire and endangered her family. First, something that's often forgotten, this isn't really what's happening, but a dream that Anthony is having. That's why it's listed as taking place during present day. Megan was a troubled child, and her doll did cause the fire. Anthony must have wondered if she truly was evil, if she caused it on purpose, and if she truly meant to kill everyone. Then, when Reverend Carver got accused of abuse, her behavior started to make sense, and he began to wonder if she was one of his victims. Did Megan start the fire and try to kill her family? No. When Dennis was on the ladder and it shook, she was already walking away. She was still sitting on her bed when Tanya got locked out, and it was already established the doors had a tendency to get stuck. And if she wanted Tanya to die, locking her outside wouldn't be the best way. This also explains Anne getting stuck in the bathroom. Megan is shown with the key, but it's not to the bathroom door. This is a misdirection. In the game's final chapter, you find that key in the grandfather clock, and you can see Megan near said clock as the fire is spreading, likely returning the key. That's right, the key was for the grandfather clock. Some people have assumed this is what we were supposed to take from finding the key inside it, but others weren't sure. Here's my proof. Think back to the dream in the Clark house. When we start playing as Anthony, it's 8:20 p.m. Shortly after this, the grandfather clock goes off, startling him. But those clocks are only supposed to go off at the start of the hour. Megan messed with the clock to prank her family because she was upset with them. So, what about present day? What exactly is going on? My best guess is that Anthony has been haunted in some manner by his family since the fire. Whether this was just in his head or in a more literal sense, I can't be sure. The comic does confirm Anthony hallucinates, with him seeing himself in his family home, talking to a therapist that we later learn isn't really there. And then, when he's forced to take a detour through Little Hope, where it all began, a little girl who looks like Megan and wears what probably would have been her school uniform appears on the road, causing the bus to crash. While I can't be sure, I prefer the idea that this is her ghost as opposed to just a hallucination. Anthony's poppet, his feelings of guilt and remorse, and being in the town cause actual magic to happen. He dreams of the fire, and in his dream, Megan is portrayed as purposefully causing it to kill her family. When Anthony awakens, he's taken the appearance of a young college student named Andrew. His family, sans Megan, is there as well, but with different names and seemingly different people. I believe, had Anthony killed himself, these would have been everybody's next reincarnations. There's a book you can find, which I believe is in the church. It talks about the soul and the spirit, identifying them as separate things. To quote, "Spirit and soul may seem the same, but God and Satan can divide the pure spirit from the often imperfect soul self. The duality is key to understanding Scripture. There is a disconnect between the spirit and the soul. We are divided against ourselves. Our spirit is pure. When God looks at us, he sees us blameless. But our soul, those things we struggle with in our heart, needs reminding of who we are in spirit. It needs purification. Only isolation and sacrifice can bring us purity." I think this may be the key in understanding what's happening. Perhaps what Reverend Carver did years ago caused the souls of his victims to be damned. The demons we fight throughout the game are those souls, imperfect and suffering. That would make their human counterparts the spirits, their true selves. The book says that our souls need reminding of who we are and of our true spirit. I believe that's what the game is about. The bus Anthony drives has ferrymen on the side, seemingly a reference to the ferryman of myth who would carry the dead to the underworld. His goal is to end the curse and free those trapped souls, but he can't do it alone. The other characters, the spirits attached to those souls, must show who they truly are. Think of it as a test of character. Failure results in death and damnation, while success means redemption. Megan does not have a demon of her own that we see, but throughout the game she serves as a guide, seemingly trying to show us both the origin of everything and explain her own actions and intentions. Mary wasn't a witch or a monster. Neither was Megan. They were troubled children who acted out, in part because they were manipulated by an adult in their lives. When Mary tells us she never meant for harm to come to the people of Little Hope, she means it. She made mistakes, awful mistakes that cost people their lives, and realized only too late what exactly she'd done. We've all been angry at someone, an older sibling, an adult who's always giving us a hard time. Even today, you'll see people dealing with those feelings by slinging accusations, seemingly oblivious to the destruction they're causing. Mary did regret her actions, but that alone is not enough. If you condemn her for what she's done, everyone is immediately damned. Perhaps this is Anthony's test of character. We don't know for sure what happens with Abraham and Mary in the past, but it would certainly seem that Anthony believed Megan to be responsible for the fire. Maybe that's why her spirit isn't on the bus at the beginning, and why she's always apart from the group. The truth, however, is that the fire started largely in part due to Anthony leaving a lit stove unattended. No matter what, he holds at least part of the blame. By accepting Mary wasn't truly at fault, he's similarly accepting Megan wasn't truly at fault. He left the stove on, and she put her doll down near it. It was a tragic accident, and one they both need to be forgiven for. Of course, this is all just a theory. Little Hope undeniably makes it seem like everything that happened was just the hallucinations of a broken man. At the same time, hidden beneath the surface, are things that seem to hint at ghosts, curses, and actual magic. Officially, there is no right answer. As the curator says, shortly after you start the game, you are about to enter a confusing, perhaps disturbing world. How disturbing might depend on what you choose to believe, and how confusing on the path you choose to take. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching, and please share your thoughts and theories in the comments. Bye for now.